Welcome to the Science and Woo podcast. My name is Sarah McLaughlin. I'm a body expert fusing clinical science, the quantum field, and spiritual woo. I'm a voice for inner leadership, mind-body intelligence, and courageously living an epic life. I'm here to catalyze your health, energy, and inner wisdom, unlock the power of your mind, and activate your infinite potential with more joy, harmony, and greatness. So let's begin. Welcome to the very first episode of Science and Woo. I am your host, Sarah McLaughlin. I'm absolutely stoked you've made it here. I'm actually stoked to have even started this podcast. And look, I have decided it's time to claim my voice, to claim my expression. And to be honest with you, I'm a little bit nervous about recording my first episode. I now have no problems talking to myself. I can talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles, and I'm certainly not one to hold back. I remember my mom would always say, "You're as subtle as a sledgehammer, Sarah." So it's not always been this way, if I'm honest. I did debating at high school, and you would never guess, but I was the fourth speaker. Now, if you haven't done debating in high school before, the fourth speaker doesn't speak. The fourth speaker sits there and listens and writes notes and doesn't say a thing. I would just get so nervous going to stand up to say thank you to the adjudicator and to the other team. And that's about as far as my little voice stretched at the time. So now, yes, I speak very openly on my Instagram stories, which is over at iam.sarahmc. I go live quite often and I can talk for a long time. But bringing this podcast to life has definitely been intentional. I want to be a voice that shares the wisdom and the words, not just of my own experiences, but of others, of people who walk their walk and talk their talk, because I truly believe there is so much for us all to learn beyond what we think we know. And it's something I love saying. It's like, can you stretch yourself beyond what you think you know? Can you open yourself more and lean in to the unknown? And so it is my intention here to be a conduit for wisdom, to open your mind, to peel back your truth, to grow your self-awareness, to nourish that growth, and to realize the greatness that's already within you. Because that's very much been my journey. And it is in service to my work that I now do, that it is my mission to help you to transcend what might be conscious or unconscious roadblocks, right? To tear down these walls, to close these gaps, and not only from within ourselves that we have, but in doing so within ourselves, it closes the gap and changes the way we relate to each other and the world. And that is huge. That is a huge mission on my heart. I'm getting emotional with my nose just saying it. But to shift the separation to unity. And it starts within ourselves, right? So this is a space to awaken your thoughts, to reconnect with your inner wisdom, and actually attune to the technology in your body. And as someone who did a degree in science and was a physiotherapist for 15 years, our bodies are highly intelligent, intuitive messengers. Our body is a vessel and a messenger. And I saw this on hundreds, if not thousands, of patients and bodies where I was allowed to put my hands on to help take away pain, right? That's why we go and see a physiotherapist, to take away our physical pain. And too many times I saw that there was more to it than the education that I was schooled with at Sydney University. And I saw it as something I was doing wrong, something I needed to learn, and something that I should be able to do as a physiotherapist. I should be able to fix that person, right? We go and get fixed by medical practitioners. And I actually almost suffered as a physiotherapist in that space because I wasn't, quote unquote, doing my job and taking away that pain. And I took it very personally. I have a big heart. I want to help people. And when I couldn't help them, I felt completely disempowered and like a failure. And sure, I understood that, geez, what you do for 9 out of 10 bodies won't always work for that 1 out of 10. But I also, within Pilates studios and yoga teaching and bar teaching, started to see patterns, started to see more personality, started to see the realities in which people were living and how there was patterns in their pathology. And now this is not what we get taught at uni. And it was over those 15 years, right, that I saw these patterns and I felt disempowered, unsure what to do. And look, I just realized I painted a story of a very unsuccessful physio, but I was a brilliant physio because I felt so deeply into the other person's situation, pain, and circumstances. I've come to learn now that I'm very sensitive human, very empathetic, and ultimately that made me very good at what I did. And from that knowledge of science, I started to be more open with the woo side of things, which I'll get into in a moment. But from that science understanding of the world, it was ingrained in me that was the only way. Like this is the way it is. This is what the evidence suggests, and this is the way we should, quote unquote, fix it. And this is a space in this podcast where I welcome you to shift your perception so you can experience inperceivable epic change, if that's even a word. I do like to make up words, so you will need to bear with that part of me. Inconceivable epic change usually comes from inconceivable ways. And this was quite the journey for me. I went and got the job that was socially acceptable and well esteemed and super professional. I always wanted to be a teacher until I injured myself training as an athlete at 12 years old. And it blew my mind that there was a profession out there where something going on at your foot could cause pain at your knee. Enter the world of biomechanics and physics and torque and lever and loads that I am still obsessed with. Someone who did very well at physics in high school and was my favorite subject. That's the person that I became into my early teens, into my 20s, and when I went and studied physiotherapy, Bachelor of Applied Science. And it was only in my early 20s that I became more open-minded. And I will speak to my health journey in another episode because it's a story on its own. But through my own health problems in my early 20s with not getting my period, being very skinny, getting lots of injuries, having gut problems, which are on and off for 5 years beforehand, like this whole shopping list of health problems, that it wasn't the trillion specialists that could provide a solution other than putting me on hormone replacement therapy and Nexium for my stomach and all sorts of things. Like it was a catalog in my early 20s. And it was my unwillingness to believe in some ways that kept me in resistance to seeing a Chinese medicine practitioner, and her treatment just blew my mind. It didn't make logical sense. It made no sense at all to me when you'd pop an acupuncture needle in my eyebrow and that side of my nose would clear. I was like, what the hell? I don't even know what's going on here. And when her herbs started to change my body within a week, I couldn't lay flat on my stomach. And I was like, ooh, that's interesting. I lay flat on my stomach teaching Pilates classes 6 times a week. I've never had this sensitivity before. And that was the crack. That was the opening. That was the initial avenue where I thought, okay, there's something going on here and it doesn't make sense to me, but it is starting to change my body. And that was in my early 20s where this open-mindedness was almost forced upon me because I didn't want to believe it, right? I was like, whatever. I just kept going about my science-based life. And later in my 20s, I had the opportunity to go and live in France, and it was amazing. I was living in the Pyrenees at a bike riding bed and breakfast. I had already raced internationally on my road bike. I just live for being in the mountains and climbing hills and just being on my bike all day. So when this opportunity came up, I jumped at it. I was living at the bottom of the Pyrenees in the hills, climbing mountains on my bike for hours every day. This was Sarah heaven. So in that space, away from my usual family ecology, away from the friends and what I thought I knew, away from the things I eat for breakfast and the things I do each day, like the habits, right? The patterns, the things you should do and the things that we all do every day. I had a chance to break out of that frame to look at more alternative things. I started reading blogs. I don't know if podcasts were really a big thing back then. You would Google and read things. I definitely grew up in the time where you actually look things up in encyclopedias, just so we're clear. I grew up with a set of encyclopedias at home and you looked things up in books. That's my vintage, but I'm definitely like a red wine and I'm maturing and growing greater with age. So within my French lifestyle, and look, I came from a family who camped. I had never been overseas beyond little Kentucky trips. My family had never been to Europe. I was the gypsy one, if you will, from a family who lived in the same house and still live in the same house for 35 years. And for me to be going to Europe was like, oh, it's not the done thing. You don't do that, right? So you can see how I was just living life on the edge, if you will, because I got a working holiday visa to go and ride my bike every day. So at the time, it felt really big for me, but truth of the matter is that's really not that cutting edge, right? But that was my first experience at like blazing my own trail or doing something courageous. And to me, it was a no-brainer. It's like, I love being outside. I love riding my bike. I was learning the French language just because I was fond of it. I do weird things because my heart calls me to do it. And I'm like, that might be fun. I'd really like to do that, and I'll go and do it. That's not how my family roll. My family are very safe, secure, reliable frame. So over there, I opened myself more to, I think it was like the Mind Body Green, if you remember that website. And I'd read and take notes and write journal stuff because I'm a massive nerd, learning about our bodies, learning more about the things I didn't learn at uni. And look, my late 20s was 10 years ago. So you can imagine that some of the stuff I learned even 10 years ago is old news now. It is old science. It's not modern methods. The science behind treatment, medicine, and our body health has jumped light years, even in the last 5 years. But it was only I started playing with crystals and oils, mainly because of the colors. I like lots of colors and rainbows, mainly because I like smelly things. So it was then when I discovered like the actual scientific benefits, enter the science world, of essential oils. And I found tons of published literature on the websites, like where it was like PubMed, if you're a science guru, which I hope you guys listening are both the science and the woo, because this is definitely a space for you. I've found on PubMed tons of literature for the use of essential oils. Now, that again, it just blew my mind. I'm like, why do people not know about this? And for clarity, if you don't know what PubMed is the website the only website that is allowed to be used and referenced when you write assignments as a university assessment task. So you couldn't just cite any old article. If you cited an online article, the level of like quantifiable, peer-redeemed meta-analogy, insert all of the science-based level of research that is required to be deemed as correct, if you will, it had to come from PubMed. So you can imagine when I'm finding all of this information on frankincense and peppermint and like gut stuff and skin things, I was like, oh my goodness. And this wasn't new. So at that point, I was like, okay, there's something to this. I got into essential oils. I got into the world of doTERRA. I started to use that for myself, for medical health, for self-prescription. And look, long story short, I got to my mid-30s and cracked open fully my wounds, my patterns, my belief system, when the relationship that I thought was it disappeared out from underneath me. My biggest wounding is in relationships through my experience in my mid-30s when I thought my life had finally fallen into place, when I thought I'd built the house, the dog was coming, it was my perfect dog, we're going away skiing in Japan, where like this man is like the thing that I have waited 34 years for. And I manifested him. He was all the things on my list. I'd done more of the Abraham Hicks work, the Gabrielle Bernstein work. I was really starting to be across more of the energetic or law of attraction, if you will, because I wanted to find a partner. And I invested myself heavily in understanding relationships. But when what I manifested that fell from the sky, that fit the box perfectly, just disappeared. Well, he didn't disappear. He called me and said, I'm not coming home. The wind was taken out from underneath me. And the experience that my body went through was almost unexplainable, because I had such an intimate relationship with my body, not because I was professionally working with bodies, but because I had done a lot of like body healing work through doctors and injuries on the bike and like understanding how to become an optimal level top athlete in Australia. My capacity and attunement to my body was huge to perform at that level and to push myself at that level and to recover at that level. To bury myself is the best explanation. I was extremely good at burying my pain. My pursuit was huge. My mental determination was huge. But we know that there's so much more to the human experience than having your eye on the ball and working hard for it. And again, that's more deconditioning, more stripping back, more like the things that we think we know, the things we think are the avenues to get to where we want to be just aren't. It blows your mind, and you have to learn in order to actually move beyond what you think you know. And it was this relationship that truly deeply impacted everything for me. I was on the opposite side of the country to my family. I was in a new town. I had no support around me. I had very little friends. I had my bike and a roof over my head. And it was being grateful for the food I eat, the roof over my head, and being able to ride my bike that held me together for days and weeks and months. And eventually I got help of a coach. She fell into my space. I worked with her on and off for years as a beautiful mentor. And it was this work that was the inner child healing, that was the somatic system, that was the entire subconscious mind, for which I knew nothing of all of that, like super deep, very much wiring, firing, like family ancestral level healing. And as you can imagine, Sarah didn't really know what was going on and didn't really believe it. So it was just, I had nothing else. And that's usually when we hit that rock bottom, right? Is when we open ourselves up to the unknown and we go, you know what? I have nothing left to lose. And I feel like that's where a lot of people cross over to the woo. If, however, you are super blessed and you did come up in a family that was open to both lifestyles, which I'm so pleased that society as a whole is morphing over to being more aware, full stop. Let alone like fully self-responsible, self-aware, understanding that the world that external to us is a holographic mirror of all that is running within us and that we 110% create our own reality. Not everyone is that far deep. And I invite you to lean in here in case that totally triggered you. And I will give my disclaimer now that you are probably going to be triggered in this podcast. I have people lined up to speak in this podcast who you may not agree with. But as someone who has shown up today to talk without a script, because the girl can talk, she's got a lot of Gemini in her chart, which she's kind of just realized is a very powerful tool, even though it probably did my mother's head in as a child. This is a space where I have people lined up to speak their truth. And in being a truth speaker, the most important thing that we need to realize is that we each have our own truth. We each have our own home. We each have our own heart calling or message. And it's not going to be the same as everyone else's. And this is where we have to hold true to ourselves, hold our alignment, know what is our voice, know what is our truth, know ourselves so deeply that we will not, we know that in sacrificing our own truth and our own calling and what is, I don't like saying correct or right, but what is a yes for us. To be able to discern what is a yes and what is a no is probably one of the most challenging things that we as unique fingerprint level difference humans need to look at and accept and not expect from another. We need to learn that our truth and our beliefs are not going to be the same as perhaps anyone else on the planet when push comes to shove, when it comes down to our own wiring and our own firing and our own what makes us who we are unique. We are the only person on this planet who is like that. And the sooner we can come to realize and respectfully disagree with someone with love, seeing where they're at, not allowing their beliefs to perhaps project onto what is a definite no for yourself, and to actually really harness your own yeses and your own nos, there's an incredible amount of inner wisdom and self-empowerment or inner power. I know some people don't even like the word of power, but it is. Your power and your harnessing of your truth and your wisdom and your yeses and your nos is where it lies. And there's so much wounding and conditioning and normalities and shoulds and habits that we all have. We all have. And it doesn't make us broken, and it doesn't make us damaged, and it doesn't make us wrong. It's just where we're at in that point in time. And I deeply believe that there is no end point. There's always another layer to the onion, and there's always something else that we can look at if we choose to, if we want to go there, if we want to open our mind and just be okay with the unknown and what we don't understand. Because let's be honest, I'm pretty certain that iPhones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and planes flying in the sky were perhaps once upon a time never believed in. So I invite you to really lean in through these episodes, which will be solo shares like this one. As I said, the girl can talk. But I have amazing humans, thought leaders, initiators, activators, expanders already lined up to share their truth and their wisdom and their experience for you, so you too can open your mind, open your awareness, share it with people who you think, well, they're not listening to me, but if it's not coming from a family member or a friend, they might actually take it in and absorb it differently because of the experiences shared. This is a conduit. I am a conduit for your growth and your evolution, to notice and step into that greatness. And from this space, the science and the woo, as you've heard in my journey today, or in the very short snippet that I've shared today, I didn't find my answers in the science. That's what it comes down to. And that was really hard for me to accept. Despite my degree in science, despite my upbringing, despite the enormous amount of evidence there was decades of stripping back and resistance in order for me to believe in something else. This quantum world that we live in is the science of it. I adore the fact that Dr. Joe Dispenza is bringing actual evidence and science to the table in so much of this woo. I just froth off that man. He's the most incredible human. I'm like, I think I was born to follow your way. Which no one's born to follow anyone's way. We're all born to walk our own way and go our own way, like that amazing Fleetwood Mac song. But this space is the fusing of the science and woo. As is my Instagram page. If you want to go and stalk me there and be in more of my magic, it's at iam.sarahmc, just MC. And look, if this information and this sharing today has really sparked a part within you, a curiosity, a playfulness, a willingness to open, to crack open, to learn, to grow, to become great, I invite you to subscribe. This is something I'm deeply committed to, bringing all of this awareness to people, but having fun along the way and also opening ourselves up. I've always been one of those people who would think about things with careful consideration. I believe that's my amazingly articulate, pedantic father and my very thorough but 100-mile-an-hour mother. I get both of their traits. I am the two of them together, right? But I am also my own person, and the more we evolve and shed the things that don't serve us, the more we shine. And stepping into our shine and blazing our own trail and jumping before we're ready because we're committed to listening to our heart, that is what has brought me here to this podcast. And if you're that person too, subscribe, join me, play with me, ask questions, shoot me your feedback, ask me your questions in Instagram so I can speak to the things that you want to hear about, so I can invite on the people who we want to hear. This is a space just as much for me to speak my truth as it is to serve you. It is being in the seat of service that brings me such joy. And this is my calling and mission here. So I'm here for the big talk, not the small talk, the truth bombs, the expanded awareness, and I'm so grateful you are here. It lights me up to be of service to the world, even if it shocks, unearths, or shakes the very ground that we stand on, because that has been my journey to get here. Thank you for listening to episode 1. I'm so excited to be here and to share all of this and more with you. Sending you lots of love always. Have a beautiful day. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. I'd love to hear from you. If you know someone who might benefit from this episode, screenshot this and send it to them. Connect with me on Instagram at iam.sarahmerk. Subscribe to stay in the loop, expand your health, happiness, growth, and evolution. Sending my love. I'll see you next week.